Blood stained the virgin snow crimson. 4 silver-tipped arrows pierced her fragile body, pinning her over the crying air she refused to abandon. The Alpha King fell to his knees, realizing too late that the lowly nanny dying for his son was the fated mate he had relentlessly searched for. The Blackwood Pack, nestled deep in the unforgiving, rugged terrain of the Montana mountains, was not a place for the weak. It was a kingdom of primal law, governed by Alpha King Alistair, a man whose ruthlessness was as legendary as his ice-cold demeanor. After the tragic death of his chosen mate during childbirth 5 years ago, Alistair had locked away his heart, focusing solely on 2 things: expanding his empire and protecting his only heir, little Leo. Genevieve Hayes was practically invisible in the grand, stone-walled corridors of the Blackwood estate. At 22, she was an Omega, a wolf whose spirit was so latent she couldn't even shift. She possessed no royal bloodlines, no remarkable strength, and no political value. What she did have was an endless reservoir of patience and a deep maternal love for a motherless pup. Genevieve was Leo's nanny. She was the one who chased away the boy's night terrors, who bandaged his scraped knees, and who taught him how to track snowshoe hares in the winter drifts while his father was away fighting border wars. To Alistair, Genevieve was merely a fixture of the house, a quiet, unassuming girl who smelled faintly of oats and unscented soap. He rarely spoke to her, save for issuing curt commands regarding Leo's schedule. He was too consumed by the demands of the Alpha Summit and the growing whispers of rogue uprisings near their southern borders. The nightmare began on the eve of the Winter Solstice Festival. It was a night of celebration, where the pack gathered in the central village plaza to drink mead, feast on roasted venison, and honor the moon goddess. Genevieve had taken Leo to the edge of the festival, keeping him away from the rowdier, drunken warriors. The boy was laughing, his small hands clutching a carved wooden wolf, when the perimeter alarms blared. It wasn't a simple breach. It was a coordinated, highly tactical ambush. Explosions rocked the eastern gates. Screams tore through the festive music as rogues poured into the plaza, their eyes glowing with feral, unnatural malice. Chaos erupted. Alistair, flanked by his elite guard, instantly shifted into his massive, midnight black wolf, tearing through the invaders with brutal efficiency. "Get the pup to the safe house!" roared Beta Garrick, Alistair's second-in-command, waving his bloodied sword toward the tree line. Genevieve didn't hesitate. She scooped the 5-year-old boy into her arms, her heart hammering against her ribs, and bolted toward the dense pine forest. The safe house was a fortified bunker, 2 miles up the ridge. She ran until her lungs burned, the freezing wind whipping her long, chestnut hair across her face. Leo clung to her neck, weeping silently into a collar. "I've got you, little cub," she panted, her boots slipping on the slick ice. "Jenny's got you. We're almost there." But they were being hunted. A sharp snap of a twig echoed to their left. Genevieve skidded to a halt in a moonlit clearing, her breath pluming in the frigid air. From the shadows of the pines emerged 3 rogue archers. They weren't just common thugs. They carried mechanized crossbows loaded with pure, unadulterated silver arrows. The scent of the lethal metal burned Genevieve's nostrils. "Hand over the king's brat, Omega," the lead archer sneered, raising his weapon, "and we might let you walk away." Genevieve's blood ran cold, but her grip on Leo tightened. She knew what they would do to the heir. They wanted to end the Blackwood bloodline. Without a word, she shoved Leo behind a thick, fallen oak log. "Stay down, Leo. Close your eyes and cover your ears," she whispered fiercely. She stood up, placing her fragile human body directly between the heavily armed assassins and the log. She had no claws, no fangs, and no combat training. All she had was her life, and she was entirely willing to trade it for the boys. The first arrow flew with a deafening thwack. It tore through Genevieve's right shoulder, shattering the collarbone. The force spun her around, sending a spray of hot blood across the white snow. A scream tore from her throat, but she staggered back to her feet, moving back into the line of fire. She could hear Leo whimpering behind the wood. "Stubborn bitch," the second archer hissed, letting his bolt fly. The second arrow slammed into her left thigh, embedding itself deep into the muscle and scraping the femur. The pure silver acted like acid, burning her from the inside out. Genevieve collapsed to her knees, her vision blurred, black spots dancing in her eyes as agonizing fire raced through her veins. "Jenny!" Leo screamed, trying to peek over the log. "No, stay down!" she choked out, forcing herself to crawl forward, using her one good arm to drag her heavy, agonizing body. She threw herself over the top of the log, shielding the boy completely with her torso. The third arrow struck her squarely between the shoulder blades, pinning her to the rotting wood. The impact forced the air from her lungs in a sickening rush. The silver poisoned her nervous system, paralyzing her legs. She was dying. She knew it. But beneath her, Leo was untouched. "Finish her," the lead archer commanded, walking closer to ensure the kill. He aimed directly at her exposed side, right where her heart lay beating its final, erratic rhythms. Suddenly, a terrifying, earth-shattering roar ripped through the forest. It was a sound that promised absolute carnage. Alistair had tracked his son's scent. The lead archer panicked and pulled the trigger just as a massive black wolf lunged from the darkness. The fourth arrow buried itself deep into Genevieve's chest. Alistair descended upon the three rogues like an avenging demon. Bones snapped, and blood sprayed across the trees as the Alpha King literally tore the assassin's limb from limb in a blind, unhinged rage. It was over in seconds. Panting, his muzzle dripping with rogue blood, Alistair shifted back into his human form. He rushed toward the log, his heart stopping at the gruesome sight. Genevieve lay draped over the wood like a broken rag doll. 4 silver shafts protruded from her body. The snow beneath her was a horrifying pool of crimson. Beneath her limp arm, little Leo crawled out, covered in his nanny's blood, but entirely uninjured. "Jenny! Wake up, Jenny!" the boy sobbed, shaking her lifeless arm. Alistair dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he reached out. He had never looked at her, not really looked at her, until this exact second. Her face was pale, her lips tinged blue, yet her final act had been to wrap herself entirely around his son. A profound, crushing wave of guilt and shock slammed into the Alpha King's chest. "Genevieve," Alistair whispered, his voice cracking. He carefully lifted her broken body into his arms, mindful of the shafts, her head lolled back against his bicep. She was barely breathing, a faint, rattling wheeze escaping her lips. "Hold on," he commanded, his alpha tone lacing his desperate voice. "Don't you dare die. Do you hear me? That is an order." The doors to the Blackwood Pack Hospital burst open, nearly tearing off their hinges. "Harrison, get out here now!" Alistair roared, his voice shaking the sterile walls. He carried Genevieve's bloody, arrow-ridden body down the corridor, leaving a macabre trail behind him. Beta Garrick followed closely, holding a traumatized, weeping Leo. Dr. Arthur Harrison, the pack's chief physician and a veteran of countless border skirmishes, rushed out of the trauma bay. Even he, a man who had seen bodies ripped apart by rival packs, paled at the sight of the young Omega. "Moon Goddess, Alistair, what happened?" Dr. Harrison barked, immediately directing his team of nurses. "Get her on table 1. Prepare the silver extractors. I need 5 units of O-negative blood, right now." Alistair gently laid her down under the glaring surgical lights. He refused to let go of her hand, even as the nurses tried to push him back. Her fingers were ice cold. 4 silver bolts, Alistair gritted out, his eyes wide and unfocused. She took them for Leo. "Alpha, you have to step out," Dr. Harrison ordered sternly, snapping on his gloves. "The silver is already in her bloodstream. Because she hasn't awakened her wolf, she doesn't have our accelerated healing. This is catastrophic trauma." "Save her, Arthur. Do whatever it takes. Drain my own blood if you have to." "Out!" the doctor bellowed. Alistair was shoved into the hallway, the heavy doors swinging shut in his face. He stood there, staring at his blood-soaked hands. The metallic scent of her blood coated him, but beneath the acrid smell of the silver and copper, he caught a scent he had never noticed before. A faint, breathtaking aroma of rain hitting dry earth and crushed lavender. He frowned, shaking his head to clear the sensory overload. It was impossible. For the next 4 hours, the hospital waiting room was a suffocating tomb. Alistair paced like a caged predator. Beta Garrick sat in the corner, holding a sleeping Leo, murmuring words of false comfort. "She was brave, Alpha," Garrick said smoothly, though his eyes darted nervously towards the trauma room doors. "A tragedy, truly. But she did her duty to the Crown. If she passes, she will be given a warrior's funeral." Alistair snapped his head toward his second-in-command, his eyes flashing wolf gold. "She is not going to pass, Garrick. And how did those rogues get past the eastern gate? You were in charge of the perimeter security tonight." Garrick swallowed hard, masking a flicker of panic. "They used dark magic, sire. Witchcraft to mask their scent. I have my best trackers looking into it as we speak." Before Alistair could interrogate him further, the doors to the operating theatre slowly opened. Dr. Harrison walked out, his surgical scrubs completely drenched in dark blood. He pulled down his mask, his expression grave, his eyes carrying a heavy, bewildered sorrow. Alistair stopped breathing. The silence in the hallway was deafening. "Arthur?" Alistair asked, his voice trembling, a sound no one in the pack had ever heard from the merciless king. "We got the arrows out," Dr. Harrison said quietly. "We extracted as much silver from the tissue as we could, but her heart stopped twice on the table, Alistair. The 4th arrow grazed her left ventricle. She is in a deep coma. Her human body simply cannot handle the toxicity. I'm sorry, Alpha. I give her less than 24 hours. Alistair felt the floor drop beneath him. The indomitable Alpha King fell back against the wall, sliding down until he hit the linoleum. The woman who had quietly, selflessly loved his son, who had sacrificed everything while he ignored her very existence, was dying. However, Dr. Harrison continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper as he stepped closer to Alistair, ignoring Garrick. "Alpha, you need to come in here, right now, just you." Alistair looked up, confused. He pushed himself off the floor and followed the doctor back into the sterile, freezing room. Genevieve lay hooked up to a terrifying array of machines. A ventilator pushed air into her lungs with rhythmic, mechanical hisses. Her skin was ashen, almost translucent. Because they had to operate on her chest and shoulder, her ruined, bloody clothes had been entirely cut away, leaving her covered only by a thin, sterile drape from the ribcage down. "Look at her left collarbone," Dr. Harrison whispered. Alistair stepped closer, his boots heavy as lead. He looked down at her delicate shoulder. There, glowing faintly beneath her pale skin, was an intricate silver-blue crest. It was the mark of the crescent moon entwined with a black, thorny vine. Alistair gasped, stumbling backward. He clutched his own chest, where an identical, burning mark resided over his heart. "A mate mark," Alistair choked out. "The royal mate mark. But how? She's an Omega. She never smelled like my mate. For 3 years she has lived in my house, and I never felt the bond." Dr. Harrison walked over to a metal tray and picked up a small, blood-soaked pouch that had been tied to a leather cord around Genevieve's waist. He opened it, revealing a crushed mixture of dried, dark purple leaves. "Nightshade and suppressed wolfsbane," the doctor explained gravely. "She has been taking lethal microdoses of it every single day. It's an ancient, highly dangerous method used to suppress a wolf's aura and mask a mate scent. It's poison, Alistair. She was poisoning herself to hide from you." "Why?" Alistair whispered, tears finally breaking past his iron control, falling onto Genevieve's cold cheek. "Why would my fated mate hide from me?" "Because," a dark, sneering voice echoed from the doorway. Alistair spun around to see Beta Garrick standing there, having quietly slipped into the room. In his hand, he held a silenced, silver-loaded pistol aimed directly at Alistair's chest. Because, my king, Garrick smirked, dropping all pretense of loyalty. She heard me making a deal with the rogue leader, Kaelin, 6 months ago. She knew I was planning to wipe out your bloodline. But she also knew if she revealed herself as your fated Luna, she would instantly become my primary target, and little Leo would be left unprotected. She stayed hidden, playing the weak Omega, to act as a human shield for your brat. Alistair's blood turned to pure, molten fire. The betrayal was a physical stab to the gut. The arrows hadn't been random. The ambush wasn't just a rogue attack. It was an inside job, orchestrated by the man he trusted most. "You ordered the strike," Alistair growled, his bones cracking as his wolf fought to tear through his human skin. "I did," Garrick said coldly, raising the gun, "and it's a shame those archers couldn't finish the job. But I suppose I'll have to end both the king and his pathetic, dying mate myself." The deafening crack of the silenced pistol shattered the sterile quiet of the operating room. A lethal, silver-jacketed hollow point tore through the space where Alistair's chest had been just a fraction of a second prior. But Alpha King Alistair was not a man. He was a primal force of nature, honed by decades of brutal warfare. At the exact moment Beta Garrick's finger tightened on the trigger, Alistair's wolf took total control. His muscles expanded, ripping through his tailored shirt as his eyes flared a blinding, predatory gold. He moved with a speed that defied physics, dodging the bullet that instead buried itself deep into the reinforced concrete wall behind him. Before Garrick could adjust his aim for a second shot, Dr. Arthur Harrison acted. The seasoned physician grabbed a heavy metal surgical tray laden with clamps and scalpels and hurled it directly at Garrick's head. The heavy steel caught the traitorous Beta across the jaw, momentarily staggering him. That single second of distraction was all Alistair needed. With an earth-shaking roar, the king launched himself across the room. He didn't fully shift. He remained in his terrifying, half-shifted lichened state, claws extended, fangs bared, fueled by the agonizing realization that the man he had called a brother had orchestrated the murder of his child and the slow, torturous death of his fated mate. Alistair slammed into Garrick with the force of a freight train, driving the traitor through the heavy double doors and out into the corridor. The impact shattered the reinforced glass. Garrick gasped, dropping the firearm as Alistair's massive, clawed hand wrapped around his throat, hoisting him completely off the linoleum floor. "You dared to target my son!" Alistair's voice was a demonic, layered growl that vibrated the very foundations of the hospital. "You ordered the slaughter of my mate!" Garrick clawed uselessly at the king's iron grip, his face turning a mottled, suffocating purple. "The pack needs a strong leader," he choked out, blood bubbling past his lips from his shattered jaw. "She was a weak Omega. You are blind, Alistair." "I was blind," Alistair agreed softly, his golden eyes burning with lethal intent. "But I see perfectly now." With a sickening, definitive crunch, Alistair tightened his grip, crushing Garrick's windpipe and snapping his cervical spine in one fluid, merciless motion. The traitor's body went completely limp. Alistair tossed the corpse aside like a piece of discarded garbage, the rage still boiling dangerously in his veins. The elite royal guards, led by Captain Wyatt, burst into the hallway, their weapons drawn, freezing in horror at the scene. "Secure the perimeter!" Alistair barked, his voice commanding absolute obedience. Garrick was working with the rogue faction. "Lock down the entire territory. No one enters, no one leaves. If Kaelin's forces so much as breathe near our borders, slaughter them all." "Yes, Alpha," Captain Wyatt shouted, instantly rallying the stunned guards. Alistair didn't watch them leave. He spun on his heel and rushed back into the surgical suite. The chaotic violence had taken less than a minute, but as Alistair stepped back into the freezing room, a sound chilled his blood far more than any assassin's bullet. The heart monitor attached to Genevieve was emitting a long, flat, continuous tone. "Babe!" "Arthur!" Alistair screamed, panic finally shattering his stoic exterior. Dr. Harrison was already frantically pressing the defibrillator paddles to Genevieve's chest. "Clear!" he shouted, sending a massive jolt of electricity through her fragile, broken body. Her torso arched off the table, but the monitor remained a flat, terrifying line. "The silver toxicity is too high. It's shut down her central nervous system," Dr. Harrison yelled over the screaming machine. "Charging to 200! Clear!" Again her body jerked. Again, nothing but a flat line. "She's gone, Alistair," Dr. Harrison whispered, his hands trembling as he lowered the paddles. The veteran doctor bowed his head, tears slipping down his weathered cheeks. "Her heart has stopped. The poison took her." "No," Alistair growled, stalking toward the operating table. "I reject that. I am the Alpha King. Death does not take what belongs to me without my permission." "Alistair, step back," Arthur pleaded. "There is nothing more medical science can do." "Then we abandon science," Alistair declared, his eyes flashing with a desperate, mad resolve. "We use the sanguis vinculum." Dr. Harrison gasped, his face paling even further. "The blood bond? Alpha. That is ancient magic. It hasn't been successfully performed in 3 centuries. To tie your life force directly to hers. If her body rejects it, the silver will travel up the tether and kill you both. You will leave Leo an orphan. If I do nothing, my soul will rot, and Leo will lose the only mother he has ever known," Alistair countered furiously. He grabbed a sterilized silver scalpel from the remaining tray. Without a second of hesitation, he sliced a deep, jagged line across his own left palm. The rich, ruby-red blood of an Alpha King welled up instantly, carrying immense regenerative power. He moved to Genevieve's side. She looked so small, so devastatingly pale beneath the harsh surgical lights. The 4 brutal, blackened entry wounds on her chest and shoulder were a testament to her unfathomable courage. Alistair carefully slid his uninjured arm beneath her neck, lifting her heavy, lifeless head. He brought his bleeding palm to her cold, blue lips, forcing the thick, potent blood into her mouth. "Drink, my Luna," he commanded, his voice breaking into a desperate, pleading sob. "Please, Genevieve, forgive me for not seeing you. Forgive me for leaving you in the shadows. I am begging you, come back to me. Come back to our son." He closed his eyes and initiated the psychic tether, pushing his own aura, his own raw life force, down the dormant mate bond that she had fought so hard to suppress. The room grew impossibly cold, the sterile air crackling with heavy ancient energy. The lights flickered and popped. Alistair felt the agonizing burn of the silver poison immediately racing up the invisible bond, searing his veins like liquid fire. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let go, refusing to sever the connection, pouring every ounce of his monstrous strength into her shattered body. "Fight with me," he begged through their mental link, plunging into the dark, silent void of her mind. "Genevieve, fight!" For an agonizing, endless 2 minutes, there was nothing but the flat line and the smell of ozone. Alistair's knees began to buckle as the silver strained his powerful heart. He was dying with her. Then a miracle. A sharp, ragged gasp tore from Genevieve's throat. The heart monitor suddenly spiked. Beep, beep, beep! Dr. Harrison let out a loud, breathless oath, rushing to check her vitals. Her pulse is erratic, but it's there. The tissue around her wounds. Moon goddess, Alistair, the tissue is regenerating. Alistair collapsed against the side of the surgical table, exhausted, bleeding, but alive. He looked down at the woman who had sacrificed everything for his bloodline. The harsh blue tint was slowly fading from her lips. The blood bond had held, but the battle was far from over. For 5 agonizing days, a relentless blizzard battered the Blackwood estate, mirroring the turbulent atmosphere within its ancient stone walls. The pack was reeling from the shock of Beta Garrick's treason. Captain Wyatt had swiftly executed the remaining loyalist traitors. But a heavy silence hung over the territory. The revelation that Genevieve, the quiet, unassuming nanny they had all ignored, was not only the Alpha King's fated mate, but had intentionally poisoned herself to protect young Leo, brought a wave of collective shame. Inside the royal wing, Genevieve lay motionless in a massive 4-poster bed, hooked to a continuous IV of nutrient fluids. The brutal wounds on her chest and thigh had closed, leaving behind jagged, iridescent silver scars, a permanent physical testament to the 4 arrows she took for the crown. Alistair refused to leave her side. He had not slept, surviving only on black coffee and the sheer force of his willpower. He sat heavily in a carved oak chair, his large calloused hands gently holding hers, his thumb perpetually tracing the newly darkened mate mark on her delicate collarbone. Curled at the foot of the mattress, little Leo clutched his carved wooden wolf, continuously whispering that his Jenny had promised to wake up. On the evening of the 6th day, the stifling atmosphere in the bedchamber abruptly shifted. The air grew impossibly dense, suffocatingly thick with the intoxicating scent of crushed lavender and rain. Alistair snapped to attention. Genevieve's fragile body began to tremble violently. A strange, pearlescent glow emanated from her pale skin, and the temperature in the room plummeted, frosting the inside of the large glass windows. Dr. Arthur Harrison burst through the mahogany doors, stopping dead in his tracks. "Alpha," the veteran doctor breathed, his eyes wide with absolute reverence. "The nightshade suppressed her spirit, but the trauma and your alpha blood have shattered the barrier. Her wolf isn't just awakening, it is detonating." Genevieve's back arched off the mattress. A profound, ethereal howl echoed through the room, not a sound from her human throat, but a psychic shock-wave that resonated instantly in the minds of every single wolf in the Blackwood territory. Outside, the raging blizzard abruptly ceased, the dark clouds parting to reveal a brilliant, full silver moon. Slowly, Genevieve's eyelids fluttered open. When she looked at Alistair, her eyes were no longer their ordinary, soft brown. They were liquid, glowing silver. It was the undeniable mark of the legendary royal white wolf, a mythical, supreme bloodline thought to have been extinct for a millennia. She had never been a weak Omega. She was a queen born in hiding. "Alistair," her voice was raspy, yet laced with a breathtaking authoritative resonance that commanded immediate submission. The ruthless, terrifying Alpha King of the Montana Mountains fell to his knees beside the bed, tears streaming freely down his rugged face. "My Luna," he choked out, pressing his forehead against her hand. "My brave, magnificent Luna. I am so terribly sorry." Genevieve blinked, the glowing silver dimming as she smiled weakly, her gaze shifting to the boy scrambling up the blankets. "Leo," she whispered, wrapping a trembling arm around the weeping child. "I told you I wouldn't leave, my sweet cub." She looked back at the Alpha King, her mate, who had finally seen her true worth. "I knew Garrick was conspiring with the rogues," she explained softly. "I had to stay invisible to watch over him. A mother protects her pup." Alistair kissed her scarred palm, his golden eyes blazing with fierce devotion. "You will never be invisible again." Did Genevieve's ultimate sacrifice and shocking secret leave you in tears? Her transition from a hidden, selfless protector to the legendary royal white Luna proves that true strength lies in unconditional love. If you are captivated by this thrilling tale of betrayal, undeniable fate, and the fierce loyalty of a fated mate, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heart-pounding, real-life werewolf stories.